All right, well, welcome everyone once again. We're glad to see all of you joined. Our topic for today is one that is really, really powerful. We're using the use case of approvals here to illustrate a tool that is just extremely powerful for you as a Microsoft Office 365 user. So our topic today is automating approvals and other processes with Power Automate, which is kind of the same thing as building your own robotic army of interns that will do the repetitive work for you. Pretty cool, pretty powerful, and feels like it should be harder than it is. Right? So glad you're here. If you do have questions while we're going through this, feel free to use our Q&A panel, the questions here in GoToWebinar. Feel free to type those in. Daryl is here with us from VisualSP also, so that can help keep an eye on that. Even while I'm doing a demo, he can do that. And we'll either answer questions as we go if they're relevant to what we're doing right now, or we'll have a little bit of time to review questions and answers at the end. So here we go. Let's talk about why this is so important. We've been talking about in other episodes of our webinar series here how Microsoft Lists in Office 365 is better when you need to share a list of data with other users, better than Excel. Excel is kind of everybody's default native language for this kind of thing. But there are really some significant advantages to using Microsoft Lists and making an online list instead of a spreadsheet that you just save in an online library. It makes things more easily findable. It's more capable for multiple editors at the same time. It's more mobile friendly. It's also easy for you to take that data that you have and reuse it across other applications in Microsoft 365. So this is a good example of that, because once you have that list of data out of Excel and into a Microsoft list, it's now possible for you to automate tasks on each and every item in that list. So some examples that might go along with that, the idea of notifications. We looked at that a little bit in our last episode, a quick and dirty way to do automations using a feature called list rules. We can do more things with Power Automate, though, and we give you a little more control over those messages that go out. We could also do things like approval processes. We could take data that's been entered in here and we could copy, move, or merge it somewhere else. Or maybe we just want to auto-populate fields in the form so that people don't have to do it manually. We could do that, or really almost any other kind of repetitive task using your data. So let's jump into that a little bit. Let's look at a demo of how we can make this work. I'm going to bring up Microsoft Lists in a browser for us, and I'm going to bring up our favorite sales tracking list that we have used for our previous demos. You'll see we've got it loaded up here. Notice that I've added a column here for an approver. Full control is just the name of the user account that I'm using here in our demo environment. So Mr. Control is the manager in this case. So I've got a list of orders here, and maybe I want to integrate an approval process in these. So there are multiple ways to go about this. We talked about in our last episode here on the Automate menu how you could create a rule, and that would give you easy notifications. Maybe you want a little more control, or like in our case today, we actually want to have a process, an approval process that goes along with this. So under this, we go to Power Automate, the Integrate menu here, and choose to create a flow. It'll open up this task panel here. Move myself over a little bit. And you have different types of flows that you could pick from here. Notice this would be just notifications. This one is an approval. Let's click on this one as our first example. When I click on the list, or click on the item, excuse me, it opens up a template in Power Automate. Power Automate is all about templates and helping you get started with things quickly without having a lot of knowledge about how to make things work in here. So if you notice, this one is a template that is fully formed about how to take something from a SharePoint list item and create an approval process using an approvals tool in Office 365, as well as user profiles and Outlook for emails. So down here, it shows me that I already am logged into all these things, so the flow will connect to them. I'm good to go. I can click Continue, and the template will automatically spin up all the little pieces needed in this flow. You'll notice as it creates it, it kind of looks like a Visio diagram, except every one of these shapes in the diagram, I can actually click inside and configure how I want it to work. Now, the template already wired these things up for me. Notice it's already looking at my sales team site and the sales tracking list. It's already figured that much out. So every time a new item here is created, it's going to start an approval process. It's already filled out some basic things. The only thing that's left is who I want to be the approver. So you could type in someone's name, like I could just type in the idea of full control, right, and do it that way. Many times in an approval process, though, it's not always the same person. You want to look that data up. So instead of typing something in this blank, I can choose to add dynamic content, and I get a little pop-up over here on the right where I can pick from any of the valid data that comes before this action, in the Power Automate flow here. So there are 3 fields available that would be a person that I could assign this to. So whoever created the initial item, the last person to modify it, or remember I said that we had this column in the list item called approver. So I'm going to pick that. We're going to assign this to whoever is configured back here in the list as the approver for the item. Right now, all of my items use the full control account. Okay. Nice, easy way to make this dynamic. Down in the rest of the flow, if we just take a look at what it's doing for us, assuming that the approval is successful, then over here, it's going to look and see, okay, what was the decision? Was the response of that approval to approve it or deny? In this case, if the response is approve, then it's going to send an email, right? Inform the creator of the approval. If that's not the case, if they didn't approve, that's the if no choice over here, then it's going to inform the requester of the rejection. Over here on the right, you notice we have another branch. You notice the little red indicator up here. This helps us to see that if this fails, if the approver up here, if this process fails for some reason, it doesn't work, then it's going to look and see who am I, and it's going to find my email address, and it's going to send an email telling me it failed, and then stop the workflow. So it's just a little bit of error handling that's built into this by default. I'm going to save this. Click for a moment. By the way, up here at the top, okay, you could also rename these. Approve my sale. Right. Save it again. And then I'm going to choose over here to test it. You notice we have a little button up here at the top, and if I click test, I get a choice to do it manually or automatically. Automatically is nice if you're doing repeated testing. You know, you've already submitted an item that can be used as your test item. I'm going to do this manually though. Click the test button. And now, as it says up here, the flow is sitting here waiting until I do something that kicks off that trigger. So back in my list, I'm going to need to go and create a new list order, an order in the list, a sale. I'm in the way again. Okay. So I'm going to select all these columns from an existing one. I'll come down here and just paste them in as a new line. That is a new order. So back over here, if I click in the flow, it now tells me the flow is running, and I can see that each one of these actions will move along and tell me when it's successful. Now, since this is the first time I'm running this, it's actually provisioning a couple of things for me in the background. So this is going to run for a moment. It won't normally take this long to run, but because it's my very first time, it's configuring and provisioning some things automatically in Office 365 for me that are going to allow the approval process to run. While that's talking for a moment, let's go back to our list, or while it's thinking, we'll keep talking. In our list, you'll notice that here under Integrate and Power Automate, there are some other options here as well. So we could choose to see our flows. Open it up in another task. We'll get an idea of what this looks like. It takes us into Power Automate, but you notice it didn't take us into the editor like we did before. Notice in here, we can see all of the flows that I've created. So they're here. I could choose to edit them, or I could click on any one of these and look at the history of what's happened with it as well. It's like there's one running right now. This is the one that I just triggered as a test. So Power Automate gives you a way not only to create these automation processes, but a way to go back and find them and manage them down the line if you want to. Because if you think about it, it's realistic that somewhere down the line, you're going to change your mind. You're either going to want this approval process to stop, or you're going to want to change the way it operates, or you're going to have dozens of these over time and need to go back and find them and manage them. Let's take a look and see if this is ready yet. It is still thinking. A couple of things for us to think about in these templates as well. You don't have to start with a template, by the way. There is an option just to create something. We'll take a look at this in a little more detail here in a moment once we get done with our test. But you can start from scratch, design one completely from blank, or you can pick from hundreds of templates that are there for different purposes. Everything we're going to do in this demo is based on the idea of a SharePoint list or a Microsoft list that we're working with. So in this case, it begins automatically when a new item is created in that list. We're going to look at an example here in a moment of how we can do that a little more manually. Let's go ahead and start up another one while that one's thinking. I'm going to go to Integrate, Power Automate, just like we did before. This time I'm going to create a flow, but instead of picking that first one, I'm going to come down here and pick one that's a little more dynamic. Notice this one, the Request Manager Approval for a selected item. A couple of key differences in this template. So we'll take a look at that concept here while we're waiting on the other one to finish provisioning. Again, the template tells us what it's all about. The idea here is that it will automatically figure out who your manager is for the selected item, okay? And then it's going to send them an approval. Now notice, to trigger this flow, we're going to select an item and choose to start the flow. So rather than it automatically kicking off when a new item is created, we can take an existing list item and decide as a human decision, now I'm ready to submit it for approval. So same idea of having approvals. It's the same tool used, but a slightly different trigger and a slightly different way of figuring out who the approver is. Notice this has a few other options here. I'm going to click to add this connection and accept it. There we go, green check mark. So I'll click the Create Flow button. And again, this template will start up a flow process for me that has all the things configured for me already. Click the Edit button, and you'll see we're in that editor just like we were for the other one. Notice this one's a little more complex. Before we dig into the details, let's check on status over here. It is still thinking, it looks like. So let's talk about the differences. You remember in our original flow over here, it happened automatically when a new item was created. Our trigger here is different. It's for a selected item. So we choose an item in the list, and then we manually kick off the approval. Once we've chosen to do that, it's going to get all the details about that item right here. It's going to find out who I am, look up my manager, and then it's going to, again, it's got some error handling over here. If it fails, it's going to notify me that it couldn't find my manager. But over here, assuming that I have a manager, it's going to start an approval, assign it to that person. It's going to show messages, and all this is already configured. There's nothing I have to do. Once that approval happens, there's going to be a result of either approve or reject, right? Just like we saw before. And then again, it's going to email me as the requester, telling me what was the result of the approval process. Let's see if this one's done. Just like real life, this anytime you have an audience, things take longer, right? So I tell you what, I'm going to save this new one as well. Ask my manager if this is okay. I will save it. And let's go test this one. This one doesn't have to provision anything, so this one will probably run faster. Let's pick one of these. I'll pick this one. Now that I've selected this sale, I am ready to submit it for approval. Up here, you notice I can choose to automate. Okay? And there's the flow that I just created. Right? There's the Power Automate process. So if I click on that, as the requester here, I get a little information panel on the right. This is the first time I run one of these. So again, it's just showing me all the things that are needed. I'll click continue. It's going to ask me, do I want to send a message to the manager? I'm going to be really creative here. Is this okay? and choose to run. So the person submitting, asking for approval does that. And then what happens is the approver gets notifications that these things are happening. So if I click back over here, let's go to Outlook first. Open in a new tab. We'll see that we get, oh, well, yeah, this one failed because my test account doesn't have a manager, right? Here's the other one, though. This one finally worked. So let's look at this one. So you notice I get an email message as the approver that gives me choices right here in the email message to either approve or to reject, including a place where I can add comments to these things. If you've ever done an approval process in the past using older things like SharePoint workflow or a third-party tool like Nintex workflow, you notice that approvals almost always have an extra task item somewhere that gets created, and you have to try and link between them. And sometimes the approvers get a little confused as to where I'm supposed to go and how I'm supposed to approve. They wind up just clicking reply and saying, yes, I approve in the email message. I don't know if you've seen those things happen. But the idea here is that it's simpler. Here in Power Automate, it creates this idea, and all I have to do is choose to approve, thumbs up, submit, and it just works. Much simpler interaction for me as the approver. The other place that you'll see these things show up is in Microsoft Teams. So if I open up Teams, as the approver, I'll get notifications here as well. So here, if I go to my activity feed, there we go. Took a moment to load. But you notice there's the request. I've kicked off a couple of these approvals, so I have a couple to see in here, but it's showing me a list of all of them, as well as the final status. Notice that I don't have to go to activity to find these. There's also an application, a little app that shows up here in Teams for me also. As an approver, I can see all of the things that I've been asked to approve. What are the items? Really nice integration that Power Automate just did for us. It created it all just because we asked for it. So hopefully, these are things that you'll find easy and useful as well. Now, we mentioned that in Power Automate, there are ways for you to go manage these processes that you're working on. So here, under Integrate, under Power Automate, this is where we went to create our flows, but there's another one here to see your flows. So if we click on that, instead of taking us to a single flow that we've created, it's instead going to show us all the flows we've created. So we could choose to go find all of these and edit any of them as well. So if you want to change something, you can. There's the opportunity over here for you just to get rid of it as well, to delete it, just so it stops. There's also the ability to turn it off temporarily, by the way, if you want to do that. So Power Automate doesn't have to be complicated. There are, of course, complicated things you can do with it. This is a tool you can grow with, but you can start off very simply just by working from your list and asking for you to integrate and do something for me. Create, pick one of the templates, and let Power Automate set things up for you. Okay. So let's go back to our slides for just a moment. So you can do a lot more with Power Automate, as we mentioned. You can start from a template. You can add whatever bits you want, tweak things a little bit to make it, and customize it to exactly what you want. You could choose to send notifications via Microsoft Teams. You can work an item through a process. What we've looked at is a pre-configured approval process that Power Automate just gives us. But you can create your own process and work an item through it so that you can automate something that right now is just a human process. And as a result, maybe a little error prone. You can help notify people, ask for approvals, get information, and push information at different times. You can auto-populate fields in your list that may be repetitive. For instance, tell me who your manager is, is one of those fields we see in forms a lot. So lots of things you can do. You do not have to just settle for the pieces that we have already. Other help that's available As always, VisualSP has some help items that can help you when you start to explore Power Automate a bit. We had a question I noticed in our Q&A panel about, will we have access to this afterwards? Yes, absolutely. In the VisualSP Help tab, you'll find a webinars group there where you can find us. All these recorded demos show up in their appropriate spot. What I'm showing you here in this slide is how you can find other information about working with Power Automate. When you're looking at the help panel, you notice there's a little link down here at the bottom to click here to view the entire gallery of help items. And when you do that, you'll wind up in just that, a gallery of hundreds, probably 1,500 or so help items that you'll have access to. And up here at the top of that, you could choose specifically Power Automate. So you see there's several help items that can help to answer questions for you or just help nudge you along in your process to understand how this works. Get started and grow as you use the tool. There are also other things that are available to us. Okay. So we'll just mention this here. If, as a member of an organization that subscribes to VisualSP, you may find that you would like to bring us in for more than just the help items that you get. It is possible for you to get personalized consulting services. You can purchase a little block of hours. It's kind of like buying yourself a gift card where me or somebody like me can get on a call and either coach you, help you build something, or build something for you in Microsoft 365. So good for you to know that is available to you from a trusted partner like us. That brings us to a point of Q&A here in our webinar. We have a couple that have been submitted already here. Anything that stood out to you, Daryl, that we should start with? Can look through these here. Okay, we've got one about the recording that we answered. Do you have to manually add the approval app to Teams, and is there a cost to that? That's a great question. That is something that just comes with. As long as you have an Office 365 license, one of the enterprise levels, you're going to have access to things like Power Automate to do those. And Power Automate is the thing that gives you the approval app as well. There is not an extra charge for that. For the approval column in the list, is that a people picker column type? Yes, it is. So that question was back here about our list. This column over here, the approver, is exactly that. So if we looked at the new form, you would see that's exactly what we had, right? No, that's a customized form. Okay. It is. You have to trust me. Right? Do this. Look at the information panel. There we can find it. All right, here's the approver, and you can see it is just a people picker standard SharePoint person column to use for this. When we use this type, Power Automate is smart enough that when we're trying to fill in a blank that requires a person or an email address, it'll show us only the fields from the list that match that data type. It helps prevent errors, makes things a little simpler. Good question. So we have one more question that's in the list already. It's a little longer one. Let me read through this one here. It says, I need to automate a sales bonus tracking sheet that I currently use a VLOOKUP to enter all the product information for type and cost. Then I have a list in SharePoint where the salespeople add their sales info. That sheet exports to Excel and uses the VLOOKUP to assign sales bonuses to each salesperson. I'm thinking by watching this that there may be a better way to do this in Power Automate. It sounds like there would be. So it sounds like you have a list of sales and then some related information somewhere that right now you're doing VLOOKUP formulas in Excel to go pull the right bonus information over. If you had the bonus information in a SharePoint list or a Microsoft list now, you could do something like that. You could have, whatever criteria you're using in your VLOOKUP function, your formula in Excel, you could create a Power Automate that did something similar. When an item is created in your sales list or reaches the right stage in that, you could have it automatically go look up information in the bonus list, pick the right bonus, and enter that in a field here in the list. So that's kind of a conceptual answer. We don't have time in what we have remaining to do a mock-up of that. But I think you're on the money there. I think that's a scenario that Power Automate could do for you online. And then you don't have all the Excel stuff to manage in the background. It all happens online and automatically when things reach the right point. Good questions. Any other questions you can think of from any of the ones we have attending today? Okay. Well, thank you very much. We're glad to have been able to speak with you a little bit, help you on your path to grow into more of a power user. Hopefully what you're finding here is that it doesn't have to be that hard to make those steps toward a power user. There's lots of these tools in Microsoft 365 that you just have to know they're there. So hopefully this has been helpful for that. We will see you next month. Have a good day, everybody.